What happens when someone builds a company that solves a problem that the market was never designed to see? That's the question at the center of this series. 7 founders, 7 companies. None of these companies fit the playbook. They don't look like the startups that get the headlines or the funding. They're not optimizing for the fastest exit or the biggest valuation. They're building in the space between what the market rewards and what communities actually need. And the question isn't whether what they're building matters, it's whether the systems around them, the capital, the infrastructure, and the institutions are designed to let them succeed. This is the Social Venture Studio Founder Series. 7 conversations with founders building at the edge of what innovation looks like when it's designed to serve more than the people writing the checks. I'm Kevin McGinnis. This is the Disruption Lab. So Courtney, you handle 200 domestic violence court cases a day. So you walk into a courtroom every morning at 9 o'clock and you make decisions that change people's lives. What happens after that? And what do you know about what happens after that?
So ideally, I wouldn't know anything because the people would just go forth and live life and not have to come back. But we do have specialized dockets for people that need more supervision than that. So that's the population that I see the most after the fact. And it's a small percentage of our population.
And this is the treatment court. So describe a treatment court for me.
So on the domestic violence dockets, we have 3 treatment court dockets. One is for high-risk offenders. That means they're on probation for strangulation or because they have multiple domestic violence cases or both. One is for high-risk offenders with co-occurring substance use disorders. They have a separate track where we try to address their substance use first, then we address their violence issues. And then we have a diversion program for young adult offenders that's specifically designed with their adolescent brain development in mind. It's a trauma-informed batterers intervention curriculum, and we focus more on like teaching them budgeting, getting them employed, giving them the tools they need at their age to go forth and succeed.
So I want to stick with you. You grew up in Schuyler, Nebraska.
I did.
Your father was a meatpacking worker who became a farmer and served on the school board.
Yes.
You've talked about him as being one of your biggest role models or your biggest role model.
Yes.
How does a public defender's daughter from rural Nebraska end up presiding over every domestic violence case in Kansas City?
Yeah. I guess the reason my dad had such a big influence on me is because there was a high population of immigrants in our town. And when he was on the school board, he had to manage to be like a lot of racism. And the way that he did that was very inspiring to me, and the way he wanted to be fair to everyone, and the way he spoke out and called people out on their racism was inspiring. And so I think that helping people and doing what's right, that's what brought me to being a public defender. And then from there, I did love helping people in that job, but the more serious cases you get, the less room there is for like rehabilitation type things. At the end of my public defender career, I had all like murder, forcible rape, child molestation, not a lot of, they're not going to treatment courts, right? They're going to prison.
Right.
And that's what made me like get burned out from that job. So that is, I think, when I started looking for something else. And then fortunately, I landed in the Kansas City Municipal Court as a prosecutor, which was great because it was low-level offenses. So I didn't have that pressure of like, people's lives are destroyed. Now, I believe in the justice system, so some of those people, they should be in prison, no question. But it was a relief to be a municipal court where there wasn't that option and where there was just like flourishing treatment courts, which is what I like to do. And then I had a mentor judge there who told me to apply to be a judge, and I did, and I was very fortunate to get appointed to the position.
So Thaddeus, I want to shift to you. You have published peer-review computer science articles at Yale.
That's true.
You also built data systems at Amazon, Cerner, CVS Health. How did a person with your credentials end up co-founding a startup with a judge?
Yeah, I mean, it was great. We were introduced by a local incubator called Osage Orange, and I met Courtney for the first time with no idea what a treatment court was, right? I mean, I personally have kind of heard of the notion of a diversion court, but being in being in suburban Overland Park area, it's not something you hear every day. But when I met Courtney, I mean, the passion she has for making the system better. I mean, it was totally infectious. So we were connected about 6-7 months ago, and it was just I could instantly see I wanted to build something with her.
Tell me about the first real conversation between the two of you. The judge's perspective, talking to a potential co-founder, and kind of what you thought of the first interaction with
probably
Courtney.
a keystone,
I had met Courtney before
Yeah.
I knew of this startup, and so I can only imagine.
Before I knew of this startup, honestly.
Yeah, it was probably a keystone. We were sitting down. I just think you're a very warm person. It was very easy to talk to you. And I think one thing for me, you talked a lot about how I had a long corporate career. Getting back into the swing of something entrepreneurial, it was so refreshing to meet someone who can just talk all day about a topic they truly care about. I mean, so I don't know. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, well, my memory of us, my strongest memory is when you came to observe my wellness court docket, because that was like kind of needed to build our system out. And he was so great. He's so kind to my staff, like asking questions, like everybody loved him. And then at the end of the docket, he said, "That was so moving." He said, "It's the only thing I've ever seen where I feel like my tax dollars aren't being wasted."
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, like I don't know. It was really special.
Yeah,
it was special because of how to see him interact with everybody. Like I knew, like that's somebody you want to work with, right? That treats everybody with respect. But then to have him immediately see like the value of it, and the impact it was having was really cool too.
Well, what I loved about that experience too was when I worked at Cerner, my mother's a doctor, my sister's a doctor, my wife's a doctor, so I felt very connected to the work. And when you go see that and feel connected to the work, it's an incredible feeling. So.
What was that process like? So did you speak each other's language, or has there been a learning curve?
Oh, no.
No, I don't
okay,
think
all
so.
right.
I'm still not speaking their language. Like I really try to just stay in my lane. Like I know what I know. I'm learning things by necessity, but I still feel I rely on Thad for all of the product.
Yeah,
piece.
I still get a district court and a municipal court mixed up. I don't really know. So but honestly, that's what's made us such a good team is we have very different backgrounds. Yeah.
But you kind of have to learn each other's perspectives because the domain expertise as a co-founder is so important to be able to sell, to be able to approach, potential clients and so on. And you have to understand what's going on.
I mean,
right?
when you get into these situations, I think one thing as I've gotten older in life is you just appreciate what someone else can bring to it. I mean, I think if I were young and I were looking at the justice system in my 20s and I had read a few opinion papers online, I would say, oh, I can reinvent this whole thing from scratch. But just Courtney and the language and the depth she brings, it constantly blows me away. Yeah.
Well, and Thad's really good at talking to other judges, because most of the judges we talk to, they have the same problem, they have the same passion. So it's like, I don't know, it just flows. Yeah. It's good.
When we talk about startups, we often refer to like unicorns, and these startups that are on this different trajectory than others. Before we get into Magis, I want to talk a little about the work you've done prior to Magis. So not just becoming a judge and becoming someone who's involved in the treatment courts, but you've been somewhat on the cutting edge and have seen kind of results that haven't been seen, and have done some programs that are kind of one of its kind or first of its kind work. So I want to talk a little bit about some of that. Recidivism, the rate of recidivism through your court is much different than what we see even on a national average. Some of the programs, you just launched the first Fathers for Change program. Yeah. So tell me about that and the mindset of changing the way the court operates. You and I had a chance to talk on another episode about that mindset. So share a little bit with us about that.
So I just think in the criminal justice system, the way that we were doing things wasn't working. We need to change our approach. We need to understand that humans are not one size fits all. We can't tell them all to do the same thing and expect everybody to change and improve. We need to listen. I mean, it's just like, I don't know why we treat it any differently than in the world outside of the justice system, right? So I'm really involved nationally in groups that are progressive, where I can learn from other people what they're trying, why they're trying it. And anytime I go to a conference, I just come back excited and full of ideas. And I will say the people that I serve, they have the most buy-in because they feel like they are being treated differently. I hear weekly, like, man, you are a different judge. Like, you don't treat me like I was treated in XYZ place. And to me, I'm just treating people the way I treat people. But they aren't used to that in the justice system, and I think that's why we see more success in our programs.
And just one thing you said on that, a slightly kind of pedantic note is, you said the word progressive, and like, that's one thing I love about seeing your programs is, there's obviously the historical Bull Moose, Teddy Roosevelt, and then there's the AOCs and that. But it's not you guys just want to see progress in your courtrooms. I think it's such a good word that you guys use.
Thank you. Yeah.
And so now you get the chance. So, when we first talked, I was so impressed by the mindset and the desire to change the way the system operates. And I love to see people inside the system do that. We often see the people outside the system who are trying to change the way a system treats and operates and does things. But to see someone who's inside the system sitting in the seat of power to be able to want to make that change was inspiring. When I learned about what you guys were doing together, I mean, now you're using AI, you're using technology to scale this and to give other judges the opportunity. So two things. One, how does the technology help? But from your perspective first, how receptive are courts to this change? And is this a headwind to try to get a solution into these other courts? Or do you see this being something that's, could be well received nationally?
When we show the demo of what the product does, the reaction is always like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. It's very far ahead of what's being used now in the court systems, these traditional case management systems. So people, I think, are ready for it. Because we're working with public entities, everybody has to do like 100 tasks, right? We don't have a lot of money to hire data people so this is really just allowing people in the court system to focus on what their actual job title is and not on plugging data into spreadsheets and trying to make sense of it. Like, that's not what their skill set is. That's not why they got involved in the court system, and yet they are having to spend a lot of time doing things like that. And this takes that burden off of them. And for judges who really just want to see people succeed and want their programs to work and want to know, like, what am I doing that's helping? What am I doing that's not? It's such valuable insight that we don't have right now, and what insight we have takes like 6 months to get.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that you talk about in the 6 months to get, just picking up on that, is what's so important is the speed at which decisions are being made, right? Like, yes, we have a technology stack, we have all this back-end stuff, we can geek out about the latest technology, but the problem we're solving is it just takes too long and is too difficult to make decisions. And sure, maybe if Claude or ChatGPT tells you the wrong vegetable to plant, okay, not a big deal. But if you have a data system that can't support making real-time decisions about people's lives, I mean, critically important. So I think the resistance is more a traditional institutional one saying, how do I do this responsibly? But we want to be their partner in doing that.
So I grew up, and I think a lot of folks, watching court TV or seeing, the television cameras get into the courtrooms. You're talking about a different type of technology that we're starting to put in courtrooms, and you're talking about, voice transcription, some of the things you've historically had a hand in building in previous roles. The reception of technology in the courtrooms, how do you see that? And is that a headwind? Is that something that they're hungry to do? They're already doing that.
That's the dirty little secret. They're already doing it,
right?
And so I think when we have these discussions, one of the big tailwinds for us is these are most times courts of record. They've got public proceedings in the audio records. They've got, even in some cases, video. They've got a lot of public disclosure documents that are required under FOIA. I think where that's been a challenge is these institutions have felt like these are big sticks instead of carrots. They've thought, oh, I have to keep a mountain of data so that when someone sues me, I can make this available in discovery. And what we're saying to them is, no, use this data to make better, more informed decisions. And so, like, I'm the sort of forever optimist in this, but I really think they have 80% of the infrastructure and we just solved the last mile.
What happens to this? I mean, I think you found out recently one of the courts was already recording all of this stuff.
Have a pilot, yeah.
It just sits there.
It even worse. It doesn't even sit in the cloud. It maybe sits on a CD-ROM in a back office. I mean, I literally, I'm sort of, you know, and I think they're such an amazing partner. But we have a pilot in Washington State where they sort of said to us, well, hey, we have historical recordings of the courtroom. We're required by law. Do you want us to ship you a CD-ROM of this? And, you know, so we said, well, maybe we could figure out a way to email it or securely upload it, right?
Yeah.
But it's just, it's a real perspective change, and yeah.
So I imagine your head was like, don't send me a CD-ROM. I don't know what I would do with
Yeah.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
Even I was like, whoa.
That's true. I was sort of thinking about that. I was like, maybe there's an antique store downtown. I can find an old vinyl record, you know, player or something. But yeah.
So Thad, the hard question, I think, one of the hard questions. Compass, ProPublica, you know, racial bias in AI is absolutely, you know, these risk assessment tools that are out there. And then when we think about AI in, you know, criminal justice, it could be a politically or ethically loaded application of technology. How do you build for that? How do you build AI into a system that is by some already racially biased, the system itself? But then there's the concerns about the technology maybe making that worse.
100%. You know, I'll take you back to, so I was one of the founding engineers on the Amazon Alexa, and when we were building out the models of recognizing people's voices, we discovered that if someone spoke in Germany, very different than if someone spoke in the Midwest, very different than if someone spoke. So there it was a very innocuous solution. You know, you take the local populations, you figure out how they talk, and then you kind of customize the voice to them. But you could imagine with institutions that have a long history of systemic bias and racial policing, that if those patterns are kind of encoded in the models, it perpetuates what's been happening. I think for us, the biggest strategy we have is we've specifically embraced a 50-state strategy. We want to go to every municipality, to every judge, to every champion and say, this is not some national on-high model. This is not something that comes with a pre-baked set of AI that's going to guide you to making decisions. This is about building a model inside of your courtroom that enhances what you do and respects it.
Courtney, you've said that in Kansas City, more than 90% of the domestic violence cases are filed in municipal court, right? And you handle every one of those. The maximum sentence you can impose, I think, is 6 months. Is that right? You've built your compliance docket, your wellness court, like all of these solutions that you have, your intervention programs, all within that constraint today. What does it feel like to operate inside a system that the scope of what you can do is structurally limited, but then you're innovating, you keep innovating? What has that been like? And how do you think about that?
Well, on the one hand, it's frustrating because some of the cases that are on my docket shouldn't be there. Some of them should be felonies, and some of them should have greater consequences. So I think about that a lot, especially with the victims that come into the courtroom, and they have been in there multiple times. I just can't imagine how frustrating that is. But I also have to balance that this is where I'm a judge, this is my jurisdiction, the maximum punishment is 6 months in jail. I can't change that, right? Like, I can't have the people come in front of me and be like, well, I'm gonna stack all your sentences until it's 10 years, which I could. Honestly, we could run their sentences consecutive and I could give them 5 years or something like that. But that's not what my jurisdiction is designed to do. So I think that's where a lot of the programming has evolved from, is like, all right, no matter what, 6 months or 6 years, nobody wants to do time in jail, and it is a motivator. And then when we can get the buy-in of like, hey, you're going to be held accountable, but we want you to succeed, and we're going to do what we can to make sure you can succeed. It is, I feel like, a perfect place to have these type of programs, to show people like, we're going to treat you differently, we're going to treat you with respect, we're going to try to empower you to succeed. So that has been rewarding, and my team is amazing. So the reason we can't have unlimited dockets is because I only really have 3 probation officers, 2 for wellness court and 1 for all those domestic violence cases. And all of them are on board with this mission of like, they're just amazing humans that have like
John Maney.
Yeah,
right?
John Maney.
John
Yeah,
Maney is
we think
incredible.
about John all the time with Magis. They're so good at what they do. They can really relate to people. People can tell they care. So I haven't my entire career worked with those type of probation officers. So I feel very fortunate.
Well, and I think that, just building off what you said, that incentive structure is so important, right? Because if we build a data system or a goal-directed system, how do you serve the goals of that community? How do you serve the goals of the people working there? I mean, we're never going to replace John. John is incredible, but can we help him achieve his goals faster, better? I mean, just again, this staff at each of these places is just so hardworking, and really they've been dealt a very, a tough hand. So
yeah, and they still do it. Like, I think the wonderful thing about Magis is like, it will free up John to only work with people.
Yeah.
And that's what he's really, really good at. And I think too, it's going to validate, even though it seems like I'm being progressive, like when we get the data, it's going to validate, like, no, it's working. And I think that's going to help. We are talking to very progressive courts with mindsets like me right now, but eventually they are going to set new standards.
So let's talk. So we've talked about the environment, the goals, what you're trying to accomplish from a court side perspective. We've talked a little bit about your background and kind of this idea of introducing technology or introducing AI, but we really haven't talked about the solution.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit, what has made us, what do you hope to accomplish with this company, and what's the product actually do?
Yeah, we've really thought about this, and our goal is to provide proof, right? So these courts are traditionally operating with a set of staff who manually take notes. They're, writing down on a computerized system while the docket is happening. So what we do is we put just a little voice recorder up on the dais, and we take a listen to everything that's happening. All the data is secure, and we're going through all the security audits. But then we can provide from that summary not only a transcript, which is where most companies that provide software to courts stop. We actually provide the insights, the action items, the follow-ons, the structured data to help really improve these people's lives. So for us, it's a simple solution with an incredible impact.
Building it is one thing, selling it is a completely different thing.
Yeah.
So, and you're talking about selling software to municipal courts now, right?
Yeah.
Walk me through what that sales cycle actually looks like, and who do you have to convince in that process?
Well, Courtney's very convincing, so she said.
I'm just excited.
I mean, you're great. I mean, we've talked with almost 100 courts at this point, and I would say maybe you want to talk a little bit about your work with All Rise and CJI and kind of how they've helped us build this relationship to show what's possible.
Right. So there are like a few organizations, national organizations, that are leaders in treatment court standards. All Rise is the leader for veterans courts, drug courts, mental health courts. They set the standards, and we have become very close with somebody that works at All Rise. And so it has helped us shape Magis to make sure we're collecting the metrics that they believe are best practices. And also, when we're talking to these courts, they all know who All Rise is, so that helps with our credibility. We work closely with the Center for Justice Innovation. They set the DV court standards. So we can say we've talked with, and some people don't even know who that is, so it's kind of like a good opportunity to say we're working with these people that set the standards for DV compliance dockets. And then we recently learned that the American Bar Association sets the standards for homeless courts. So we are working with them, and especially some of the newest genres of treatment courts are the ones that are most interested in working with us, because they're trying to validate their programming and teach people what the best practices are for that specific genre. And so in using Magis, and if we have the best practices built in, it's kind of a teaching tool as well.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a I guess what we would call it in kind of the AI world is it's a global plus a local model. We talked about the 50-state strategy, right? And so, if you think of All Rise and even, best practices from the internet and Claude and all the things it's been trained on, you can give that kind of global model to these courts to improve their day-to-day, but then we augment that one-on-one with the courts based on their own practices. And I think that combination gives us the initial credibility in the sale, but then really helps us close it by saying, we're not just going to drop a tool in your lap that's going to do things for you. We're going to make this a tool that really you can customize and use every day.
So more tactically, when we work with entrepreneurs and founders and talk about selling into enterprise, oftentimes they think, I got to sell into this company.
Yeah.
But the truth is you have to sell to a person. There's
That's
a
right.
person inside the company who has to say yes, at least, and maybe it's not one person in the 50-state strategy,
Yeah.
maybe it's a different person in different types of courts, but who has the veto power as well? Like who,
yeah.
Like what have you learned about the inside and who you're selling to versus just selling to a court?
Well, it's interesting. The court ecosystem is very similar to the hospital ecosystem in a lot of ways.
Okay.
And I remember in my Cerner days, you would kind of map out the stakeholders what are the physician groups, what are the nurse groups, what are the patient advocacy groups, what about the hospital administration? So we do similar exercises with the courts, right? So we'll take a look at a district court and say, who's the judge? What are their views? Are they leaning towards progress? Do they belong to national groups like All Rise or others that have sort of certification standards? But it's a whole stakeholder process. We'll include court administrators, probation officers, city and state finance. There's really a complex stakeholder landscape, and these are large enterprise sales. This isn't $20 a month SaaS. These are 5 or 6 figure deals. So you do really need to be cognizant of a very complex ecosystem.
Courtney, you are a sitting judge, co-founder. Your court could be a customer. How do you navigate that? Like, what's that process? What have you learned about that process, and how do you navigate that as a co-founder in this situation?
Well, it's all new territory for me. It's not something I ever thought I would do. It's not something I've been pining after, but there is a judicial ethics commission for Missouri. So that was the first people I called. And when I was first talking with them and we were just a little twinkle in our own eyes, they were all about it. But then once we had the pilot phase, they're like, well, it could be a conflict of interest in your court. And we were going to charge, but that's so then out of an abundance of caution, I'm like, okay, we're just gonna stay out of Missouri, because I'm a judge first.
Yeah.
And I don't want to cross any lines. So I try to keep myself informed on what the lines are, and let them know that I'm doing that due diligence. And then it's sad though, because I really wanted to use it in my court. We were gonna charge my court, and especially John, who we work with a lot, he was so excited about it. So it is what it is. I'm hoping that we're starting outside of Missouri. We have courts all over, Miami, Virginia, Okanogan County, Washington.
Yes.
So I'm hoping that eventually it works its way back, and at that point.
And I think one thing too, you touched on it earlier with, you're doing a large enterprise sale, you've got to have expertise from inside the house, right? Inside the institution. I mean, I remember at Cerner, we had probably 3 or 4 dozen physicians on staff just to keep us grounded. If anyone from Missouri is listening or, wants to get involved, I mean, we're very apolitical. This is not a left issue, a right issue. We're trying to make the system better. So, we welcome that kind of government involvement to say, let's do it the right way, let's get in here. So I think just given how small we are, we stayed out of Missouri, but we always welcome the opportunity to get back in.
Is the issue charging in the court? I mean, could you use it in your court?
Yeah, we told them we were not going to charge.
Yeah. Okay.
And they didn't ever, they are looking out for potential whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So they were just very vague. So they weren't no, they didn't issue but they were well, it could be a conflict, and we weren't charging. So I'm just okay, well.
Well, and I think I always, what's the Hanlon's razor, the assume ignorance, not malice. I think where they're coming from is they're sort of saying this is untested, this is unknown.
Abundance of caution, right?
Abundance of caution, and we totally understand that. But, the last thing I think any technologist should be doing is deploying really critical infrastructure without subject matter experts. So it's a real shame.
That's been happening. That's been happening in the court system, and that's why everybody hates their case management system, and everybody hates it's because people that aren't in the court system are designing them, and they're clunky and they don't work. So sorry.
This is like,
but that's how it is.
This is the secret sauce from Magis, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you have, and you don't see this in a lot of startups, in enough startups, where you have the true domain expertise sitting next to the technology and the design and the implementation and the execution of that technology.
Well, let me give you a concrete example. When we show the demo to our judges, the first screen we pop up says phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and who's in warrants, right? I will tell you, I don't really even know what that means, but Courtney knows what that means, right? And so when Courtney is designing it around a set of standards, if I had done a dashboard around what we typically do in SaaS. So it's a huge opportunity, and I think a learning opportunity, right? The message out there is, if you're in a highly regulated industry, you do not want these AI last mile solutions or these technology last mile solutions deployed without your consent and your expertise. And so it's a huge opportunity for regulators to get in the game.
So what's the difference for you as you're selling into these courts, as you're selling into these systems, between this sounds great, this is cool, and I want to pay for this?
Yeah.
Like, what's that trigger? What's that gap look like today?
Well, it's our whole sort of value prop, which is proof. They need proof, right? And I think, yes, there are budget constraints, but Courtney and other judges find ways to get their staff resourced. So, we're working with a pilot court right now to get that proof. The biggest things we're going to prove is that the collection of the data works, the time taken is reduced, and we're going to get very good productivity metrics where we see that people are spending less time doing menial tasks. But the next layer of proof, which I'm confident we're going to get this year, is when you measure what works, you can change what works.
Yeah.
You can improve the system, right? And so if we start measuring in a courtroom how community partners are being utilized, whether folks who are in warrants are requiring other attention or special care, that's going to make a difference.
Well, I kind of want to touch on that, because you're taking basically 4 elements: speech recognition, AI analysis, outcome tracking, grant management, and you're kind of putting them on one platform.
That's right.
Why is that important to be on one platform versus, there's solutions today that do all of those things, right?
Sure. Well, I would say 2. One is the people who are doing the work don't want 4 platforms. That's just the biggest thing is Courtney. Well, the first time I saw Courtney's IT infrastructure, we won't name names, the guilty shall remain nameless, but it was a little crazy in the amount of chaos and sprawl. But I think the second thing too is that's such a technologist way of looking at it, is like voice capture and synthesis is one activity, and one activity is AI. And I'm not saying that's bad, but that's how I would describe my platform. John Maney just wants to get more funding. He just wants to know what works, right? So for us, everything needs to be invisible. It needs to really be a user-centered product design. And so we found that the through line was, taking data and making it usable and actionable.
I want to switch a little bit to kind of personal reflection, leadership. Courtney, the first time I had a chance to sit down and talk to you, I think I asked you a similar question, and I wonder if your answer has changed after this experience with Magis, which is, you've been on the bench for over 10 years. You've had the opportunity to, tens of thousands of cases that you've actually had come through the court. What's the one thing you wish the public understood more about what happens in a DV courtroom, and what do you hope to change now, not just in your court, but in others?
Well, I think this first answer will probably be the same, is that courts do have the capacity to hold people accountable, but also seeing the individual and letting them talk about what they're going through, in addition to holding them accountable and providing them the resources that they need to succeed. And that can come from a court system. And especially in wellness court, we have so many community partners to give people resources. So that would be my first thing that I would want the public to know. Not that the court system doesn't have to be terrible, you know, like that's what people think, like, oh, I don't want to go
I don't
there.
want to go to court.
Whenever
Yeah.
I introduce myself to people, they're like, oh, I hope I never see you. It's like so rude. But it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
But what I really want with Magis, so it has this chat GPT function where you can like type in, when you're in staffing, you can ask a question like, how many people do we have that's primary substance is fentanyl? Or we can do that with Magis. That is, to me, what's the most exciting, because that will really open up room for new best practices. Just things that we don't even recognize that we're doing, like by treating all the substances the same or all the diagnoses the same, we will be able to really even further hone our treating the whole person approach by getting information on what works the best. And even like marijuana use, and that's a big issue, marijuana use and mental health. Getting better information on that rather than, no, you can't use that in here. You know, I'm so excited about it because I think the best practices are great, but I know we can learn more. And I think these questions about the data come up in staffing. They come up in the moment. It's not like, I can't go home after this crazy docket and be like, oh, I wish I knew, blah, blah, blah. Like, it comes up in the moment. And so this gives you the ability to answer those questions and kind of follow through the train of thought. And I'm excited about that.
I really want, I've said it a couple times. I've had the opportunity to sit down with Courtney before and talk about treatment court and the innovation and the work she's doing as part of this podcast. But I think asking you this question intentionally is because you aren't a judge or you aren't from this domain, right? When Magis works and you're deployed in courtrooms across the country, and the measuring of outcomes, the management of the data, the visibility that Courtney just described, when that changes, what changes for the person standing in front of the judge 5 years from now, from what you've seen?
Well, yeah, I mean, for the person standing in front of the judge, I mean, you know, I'll give a story from when I was at Courtney's court. There was an individual who came up, clearly has a lot of issues with homelessness and substance abuse, and you know, the question was very simple: what kind of electives are you working on? And for those who don't know about treatment courts, they say electives, right? And it basically is a way to get them to either express themselves or deal with their mental health issues through maybe yoga or music. I think this individual was music, and the person came up. You probably know who I'm thinking of. This person came up and said, well, I'm working on my music. And I think the goal for me is like, I don't want Courtney to be like, oh yeah, that's great, and then enter music and a note, right? Or John, make sure you follow up with this. You know, Courtney doesn't do this, so that was incredible. But I saw Courtney look in that person's eye and say, what kind of music do you do? You know, and that, like, I always talk with Courtney about being born on third base. Like, for me, that's a very, I was so lucky to have amazing parents and an amazing spouse. And when I say those things, people respond to me. But someone can come into that courtroom, and instead of having a judge who can just turn away to a computer, if that interaction is back, and you know, that caring is back, I mean, that's what I want to see in every courtroom in America.
It's cool to see the passion and the opportunity inside the system matched with, you know, the opportunity to scale it. And I think that's one of the reasons that we were excited to have you guys in the program. So thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
You know, thanks for what you're building. I mean, I think it's got an opportunity to be a true game changer. So anything you want to add, anything that we haven't talked about?
I just want to, I back on the thank yous. I mean, we should have probably done this up front, but you know, we're currently funded by two partners, Keystone through the Social Ventures Studio and Digital Sandbox for those watching YouTube. That was intentional. You know, one thing that I have found so amazing is, because I've worked in large institutions and large corporate entities where everything's bottom line or dollars or ROI or whatever. The willingness of you, and this is very honest, the willingness of you, your staff, Jeff and the folks at Digital Sandbox to almost take a flyer or just see the potential. I mean, if we're going to grow Kansas City as an ecosystem, which I hope we do, this is my home and this is where I'm raising my children, like, people like you are just critical. So I really thank you and the Digital Sandbox folks for giving us this opportunity.
Oh, thanks. I mean, what we're here to do, right? Is to take a bet on the folks that are right, like trying to change the system. That's
Right.
the whole point of having a social venture studio, because you guys are an incredible social venture.
Yeah.
That intersection of social impact and building a sustainable business, making capitalism work for the people, is our mission. So
Yeah.
again, thanks. Courtney, anything you want to add? I mean,
That was good. Thank you. Yeah. No, thank you for this opportunity. And yeah, I love what you're doing for Kansas City, and I don't consider myself part of this accelerator, whatever is happening. I'm not part of it. But when I see the work that you're doing, and I come to your events, and I see people excited to be there, and you are great to everybody and welcoming and open to people's ideas who are stepping out in kind of a scary, intimidating space. That's really cool. So
no,
thanks.
you're part of the ecosystem, whether you want
Yeah,
to.
whether
Yeah,
you want
I
it or
know.
not.
Yeah.
I know.
I don't. I'm staying
Welcome to the
out.
party. Yeah, no, welcome to the party.
What's that? You're the Batman, judge by day and
Yeah.
entrepreneur by night.
Yeah,
right.
that's cool. Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks to both of you, and thanks for sharing your story with us. And we're gonna have you back on an alumni episode at some point in time and
Love
talk
it.
about kind of all the progress you've made and see the changes that you're actually making in the system. So
Look forward to it.
Yeah, sounds
all
great.
right. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you.